Welcome to My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. If you're like most people, you've spent your entire life focusing on the demands of parenting, of relationships, of your livelihood. Much like you've been riding in a life-powered bobsled, leaning into what others expect of you. But I'm here to help you reclaim your life. I want to embolden you to raise your hand today and every day and say, "It's my turn." I'm Rikki Schwartz, and welcome to It's My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour, and let's see if we can begin to get the seeds of reclaiming your life to take root. And then please join us on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month at noon Pacific time, where my expert guests and I will do our best to give you the tools you need to finally say, "It's my turn." So today I'm excited. We're going to be talking with return guest Nate Regier about the compassion mindset, the 3 switches of compassion, and how this compassion mindset can transform how we see ourselves and others. You may remember Nate when he was last on our podcast on October 2nd talking about the process communication model. And we received such a great response to that podcast that I invited him back to talk about a subject that is particularly near and dear to my heart, compassion, since I am by nature an empath, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's not so good for me. Nate is the CEO and founding owner of Next Element Consulting, a global leadership firm dedicated to bringing compassion into the workplace and, of course, into our personal lives as well. Regier is also a former practicing psychologist and a leading expert in social emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, and leadership. Recognized as a top 100 keynote speaker, Nate is the author of 3 books. 1, Beyond Drama, Transcending Energy Vampires. 2, Seeing People Through, Unleash Your Leadership Potential with the Process Communication Model. That's the one we discussed last time Nate was on the show. And finally, 3, Conflict Without Casualties, a field guide for leading with compassion, compassionate accountability, which aligns beautifully with what we're discussing today. And of which, by the way, he's offering 2 free copies to interested listeners. Finally, he also hosts the popular podcast On Compassion with Dr. Nate. Welcome back, Nate.
Hey, Rikki, it's good to be here. I'm so glad to be on your show, and it is always great to visit with you. I love this, and I'm so excited about our topic today.
Me too, and thank you again. So as I always do, and you did it on October 2nd, we'll do it again in an effort to kind of fast track a connection between all of my guests, even returning ones, and my listeners. I begin every interview with the same question. What are your personal core values, and in particular, the ones that align with our interview today?
I did not know what I was going to say until about 10 seconds ago.
I love that. Go.
And then when your intro was playing the music and it said it's time for you to raise your hand. I don't know if you saw I raised my hand.
Yeah.
It's my turn. And so what I realized, and thank you for inspiring this, is that my value that is really relevant today is it's always my turn to take ownership over my feelings, my thoughts, and my behaviors. That's my turn. It's always my turn. And it's never anyone else's turn, and it's never my turn to take responsibility for other people's stuff. And so I thought that's really important for me to realize at any moment what really is my responsibility in this moment and what isn't.
Oh, I love that. Right. That's a great launching pad. So let's talk about the compassion mindset. And before we do, I wanted listeners to understand that Nate and his organization has actually registered this trademark called the compassion mindset. So it's not a generic term. It's actually a paradigm, if you will, or a concept or philosophy that Nate and his organization has developed. So first of all, what is the compassion mindset, Nate? And how does it differ from other mindsets?
Yes. Well, it's kind of a neat story, actually. It's about 2.5 to 3 years old, this concept, although we've been working on it for a long time, but we discovered it back in, I think, late 18, early 19. And we were developing a new version of our leading out of drama compassionate accountability training for large organizations. And we were trying to come up with something a little bit more tighter, simpler, catchier to really go big in organizations. And our consultant brought up this concept of mindset. And we said, well, yeah, I mean, of course, compassion is a mindset. And then he said, well, what is the compassion mindset? Uh, um, I don't know. So we actually were started to thinking about that. And what we realized is we were encouraged to discover something we've been doing since day one, which is we know that mindsets are critical. We've heard about things like, growth mindset. There's all these different, we know that mindset and attitude makes a big difference. And we started reflecting on over the years when we used to do training, what was the difference between the smart people that got it and the smart people that didn't?
Yeah.
Everyone's smart and capable and everyone is trying hard, but what was the difference? And it was an attitude. It was
Hmm.
an attitude about themselves and other people that allowed them to absorb the material and practice it and try it and learn and grow. And so what we realized is yes, there is a critical attitude. And so we started trying to figure out what is it. And that led to the compassion mindset, which is three specific attitudinal switches that have to be turned on in order for us to practice full compassion like we teach in all of our programs.
Perfect. So
And
I,
yeah, and actually, I got to show you something. I got
yeah.
to show you something. So when the time comes, I'm going to show you. This was my first model. I went to a hardware store and I built this thing, and I'll show it to you later.
Good. I'm very visual as well. So
Yeah.
anything like that that gets
Yep.
built or constructed or has an image that helps me retain the information. And I think next time probably deals in your consulting and so forth with companies and
Yep.
corporations. And I so admire that. Today, we're going to be speaking to both, right? How we incorporate into our personal lives as well as our workplace lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Perfect.
I probably use it personally and interpersonally as much as anywhere.
Good. And so tell
Mhm.
me, we're going to talk about the switches after the first break, but tell me how your own, without giving too much away, how your own mindset, have you detected the shift in yourself? Because I can't believe you started out with the compassion mindset from day one. So tell me what you sensed in yourself, the shifts you've started to see both and after, before and after you created the registered trademark, the compassion mindset.
Yeah, great question. Being forced to formalize and articulate what this was really important work for our company because it coincided with our efforts to try to get much more clear about what is our mission and our purpose in the world and why are we here and what kind of a difference do we want to make as a company, as individuals, as a community in this world. And so it helped us to just get crystal clear about this is what we mean when we say it. This is how you grow it. This is how you measure it. This is how you know if you're doing it. So it's allowed me to be a lot more intentional because there's these little signposts I can look for and I can kind of like, uh, well, when we get to the switches, it's kind of like you can tell when a switch is on or off because either
Yep.
the light's on or it's dim or it's
Yeah.
not on.
Yeah.
And so it's really helped us get really clear about how we talk about it and teach it, and we want to give it away to the world.
So, and again, we're going to talk about the three switches when we get back, or start with them when we get back. But from a 30,000 feet, am I incorrect in saying that it is harder to demonstrate to experience the compassion mindset when we're under stress?
Yes, yes. Compassion is the practice of demonstrating that humans are valuable, capable, and responsible in every interaction. That's a mouthful, but it's not easy. Compassion is a lot more than just empathy or my heart goes out for you. I want to donate to your cause. This is an active relationship that involves how I see myself, how I see you, and then how we interact with each other. So so yeah, I mean, this is the practice of compassion. And it does change how we see things and it translates into very specific behaviors.
I know in my case, I am extraordinarily compassionate. I should say I'm intentionally compassionate unless I'm in a hurry.
Yeah. Well,
And then I become so judgmental of the humans in front of me. Why can't you do it XYZ way? So please tell
yeah,
me I'm
yeah.
not alone.
You are not alone. And to your point, to your question about distress and stress, when we are under stress, the mindset starts to get fuzzy and foggy.
Yeah.
And when we are in distress, the mindset shuts off because in distress, compassion is not our priority. In
Got it.
distress, being justified is our priority.
Yep.
And compassion and justification do not coexist.
So it's
So,
kind of like saying you can't fight or flee if you're trying to be mindful of compassion. They would be kind of counterintuitive in a way.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and they work against each other. Distress really tries to undermine the compassion mindset at every level and
Yes.
tries to get us not to believe that it's true.
Yeah,
Um,
I think our minds do lie to us when we're under stress. I can't tell you the number of times that I have resumed normal anxiety levels, right? So whatever was causing me stress came down, dropped down. And then I recaptured in my mind whatever conversation I had while I was anxious. And of course, I'm ashamed. And I think,
yeah.
boy, I hope I'm not alone in this. I don't think I'm alone in this. I used to tell people that your true character comes out when you're under stress. I think you actually persuaded me not to necessarily think that when we're talking about this type of thing, it's really a function of character is a mindset and you really can't expect it to be present at all times. Am I recapturing that
No, I
correctly?
think you're absolutely right. And yes, in distress and stress, we do show some true colors, meaning a very predictable, consistent part of who we
Yeah.
are, a
Like
part
the
of our
process
behavior.
communication model taught us. Yes.
Yeah, but I really want to believe that in distress, it's the behavior that's the problem, not the person. And our true best selves are what we show the world when we're not in distress. But they're two sides of a coin.
Yeah.
So, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we both have both.
Yeah. I really hope you're right. I really do. I'm going to be living in a world of shame and I don't really
Uh,
want to do that. But
Most of my
nevertheless,
shame
I still try to make it intentional regardless and do my best.
Most of my shame and self-reflection is when I'm mowing the lawn, but I don't tell anybody what's going on inside my head.
Well, on that note, let's take our first break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about those three switches that are required in order for our mindset to be one of compassion. See you
Yeah.
guys back in 3 minutes. And we're back. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. In case you're just tuning in, my return guest today is Nate Regier, three-time author, CEO, and founding owner of Next Element Consulting. He's also a former practicing psychologist and leading expert in what we're talking about today, the compassionate mindset. The compassion mindset. By the way, you can request a copy of Nate's book, Conflict Without Casualties, which I highly recommend, by putting a request in the Facebook Lives comment field if you're there, or by calling the studio at 800-930-2819. Just say, I want a book, and we'll make it happen. Limit 2 books, so if you really want one, jump in. Also, I want to make sure that everybody knows how to contact Nate once the interview is over. Nate, give him your best contact information.
Best contact information is straight through our website at next-element.com.
And
And
that's
if
the
you,
trick. Sometimes I forget the
yeah,
dash. So don't forget the dash.
next-element, and you can look up Nate Regier on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, and I'm pretty responsive in all those mediums.
So are you telling me I'm pronouncing your name wrong this whole time?
No, you're pronouncing it in the OG French way.
Well, bien sûr, je
Regier.
parle
Regier
français.
makes me sound fancy.
It does. Well, I'm going to try to remember it the non-fancy way, but forgive me if I go back to Regier. So Nate Regier, thank you so much for
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome.
So let's start with the first switch that makes the compassion mindset work. And I believe that is called value. Tell
It is
us what it
called
looks like
value.
to turn the value switch on.
All right, so here's my original prototype. So I conceptualized, or we did, 3 switches, and they all have to be on in order for energy to flow, right? For the light to be on, all 3. So these 3 switches here are called value. Well, the first one is value, which is what we're going to talk about, and it's right over here, on and off. So let's talk about this. So value. This really has to do with how we see the value of human beings. And we can perceive when the switch is on, we see human value as being innate. It's not conditional. It is innate. I don't decide who's valuable and who's not valuable. We just are because we're human beings. We are worthwhile. We're valuable creatures. And we don't have to earn it. It can't be diminished. It can't be increased because it just is. It's independent of our behavior, of whatever. So in that situation, when the switch is on, you know it because somebody will trust your intentions, or they will give you the benefit of the doubt, or they will be able to separate behavior from who you are. They might be able to say, I really appreciate you as a human being, and I really had a problem with this behavior that you did. They can make it personal. They can they can get personal without making it personal.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And so we can have, when the switch of value is on, we can have tough conversations. Like Rikki, I really felt embarrassed when you blah blah blah, and I know we're close. I care about you as a human being. I don't think less of you as a human being, and let's talk about this behavior. And
Oh,
we can do that, or we can talk about performance in a way that doesn't undermine someone's human value. When,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. I was going to talk about when the switch is
I,
off.
what that made me think of, and I'm so sorry to interrupt, what that made me think of then is when you were talking about the folks in your class, the smart ones who get it and the smart ones who don't, and you realize that it was a function of the compassion mindset ultimately. It's got to be tied to emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, whatever you want to call it, as well, right? I don't think anybody with a low EQ could have a conversation like, I
No,
value you, but that behavior
no,
I found, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
no.
got to be tied to EI in some way, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so high emotional intelligence, they are tied, and it's really kind of a precursor, or it goes hand in hand with
Yeah.
emotional intelligence.
Okay.
When the switch of value is turned on, I care about your feelings. I tune into your feelings. I notice them. I value them. So I might say something like, your feelings matter to me, or I'd love to hear more, or it's okay to be afraid.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
or I might say things like, oh my gosh, I've been there too. I am so sorry for you.
Yeah.
So I'm treating you as if your feelings matter. My
Got it.
behavior shows that.
Got it.
But yeah, emotional intelligence means if I'm going to do that, I have to learn about them, and I have to tune into them, and I have to understand them and know how to talk about them.
And on both the receiving end and the giving end, right?
Yeah.
You both have to have a pretty high EQ for that conversation to work, regardless of how compassionate the giver is trying to be. If the receiver has a really low EQ,
Um,
it's possible they're not going to hear the nuances and just
mm.
hear, I didn't mean to make you mad, that kind of thing.
Or what if the receiver switches off and they don't believe they're valuable, and so
Exactly.
they don't they can take constructive criticism and make it personal, or
Yes.
they
Yes.
they don't take compliments because they don't believe they're valuable.
So it really
Um,
is a two-way switch. Yeah.
all I have control over is my switches, though.
That's right. I understand. Okay.
So what if the switch is off? Um, it's not that people are not valuable, it's that their value becomes conditional.
Additional. Okay.
When the switch is off, we place conditions on it, like you're only valuable if you meet the target deadlines on our goals. You're only valuable if you get home from your date with your boyfriend on time. You're only valuable if I don't have to remind you to make your bed or clean up the dishes.
Gotcha.
And you'll know that that switch is off because I might say something like, what's wrong with you, or how many times do I have to tell you, or just because I said so.
Mhm.
So those comments represent that our switch is dimming and we do not see that person as valuable anymore.
Mhm.
Or how many times do I have to tell you? What I'm starting to say is, I don't see you as a valuable human being as much as I did before or under these conditions.
Yeah.
Or what if we see ourselves as conditionally valuable? The condition I put on myself when my switch goes on is I expect myself to be perfect, to be worthwhile as a human being. So I have to overthink, I overanalyze, my emails get too long, I explain things too much. I feel like I have to insert 15 supporting documents before I can, say something to someone. And that's because my switch is dimmed and I'm expecting perfection. I'm not realizing I am okay regardless of how you take my idea. I am okay regardless of what you think. And if
Yep.
you ask a question and you're confused by what I shared, I'm still okay.
Right.
Um,
So,
so I
so
think that,
I love using quotes to demonstrate things, and I love how you gave the switches off quotes. How many times do I have to tell you,
no.
et cetera, et cetera. So, rattle off some switches on things you'll hear yourself say, and
Mhm.
and provide some again quotes you might say if your switch is off or dimming.
Yes. So the principle is the switch can be on when I know that how someone responds to me does not define me.
Mm.
And I'm free at that moment. My switch can stay on. So it might be something like this. I might, here's switch on. I might say, Rikki, I'm feeling really embarrassed about what I did yesterday. That's super vulnerable. Now, my switch is on because I know that how you respond to me won't define me, and I'm going to let you see who I am because I'm going to open up to you not because I trust you to handle it right. I'm opening up to you because my feelings are worth it,
That's
and
good.
I'm honoring that.
Yeah.
Or I might say to you, I am so sorry for what you're going through. I'm here to listen if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Switches off might be something like, I don't have time for you to. Are we done talking about your feelings now? Or if I start interrogating you about your feelings, like somehow they're not valuable unless you can make them rationally make sense. Well, when
Yep.
did you start feeling sad? Or why are you so upset with him? Or, I don't get why you would have a problem with that. It's not a problem for me. So
Mhm.
I'm just invalidating your experience, and that would be me having my switch off for you.
So
Um,
is a switch off quote that I hear a lot, and I think we might have talked about it in our last interview. Would you consider this a switch off quote? Person A says, "What you said really embarrassed me. It really made me sad and hurt." Person B's switch off quote would be, "I'm sorry if what I said bothered you, but."
mhm. Actually, both of their switches are off in that situation because if I say what you said really hurt me, I'm giving you all the power over my
Right.
feelings. And
Yep.
my switch is
Right.
already off because I'm not responsible for my feelings.
I
Now,
like
if
that.
I said I feel really hurt when you say that, I'm owning my feelings.
I love that. Okay, I get
Yeah.
it.
So there's a category of feelings that we call re-victimizing feelings that someone switches off. Like when they say, you disrespected me, you hurt me, I feel unappreciated. Those are all things that give you all the power for my feelings.
Yeah.
And people with their switches on, they own their feelings. They don't give anyone else power over them.
Got it. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I think I'm going to be thinking, and I hope this works for the other two switches, because the minute you give me the quotes, the light bulb goes off for me. For some
Yeah.
reason, those are the metaphors I need. So I hope they work for
Yeah.
the other two, because I think it makes me hear things I've said or heard,
Yeah.
unlike anything else. So thank you for sharing those. We're going to go to break in just a minute or so. Anything else you want to say about the first switch before we go to break?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about intentions. When
Okay.
the switch is on, we trust someone's intentions,
Oh.
even though we might not like the behavior.
Mhm.
So when the switch is on, we check assumptions. So let's say you say something and I feel hurt or I feel angry. If my switch was off, I would say, see, there she goes again. But if my switch was on, I would come to you and say, I felt really embarrassed. And I just want to check what was your intention when you said that?
Well, that's good.
So I don't jump to conclusions. I trust intentions, but that doesn't mean I don't check.
That's good.
Um, yeah.
That's good. I like that a lot, because I like the concept of not assuming the intentions, and that's obviously built into this. But I also like the fact that not assuming the intention is married with their intentions don't define me. I want to have this conversation,
Mhm.
but they can't
Yeah.
make me feel
Nope.
anyway. So I think those
And
are the
they're responsible for their feelings and I'm not. So how they
right.
respond, I don't need to be worried about.
Yeah.
Or what about this one? Well, I'm just not going to bring it up because it'll just make things worse.
Worse, of course.
That's my switches off on myself. I think that somehow I'm capable of causing other people's bad feelings, um, and that I'm not going to be okay if they're not happy with what I said.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's incredible. Well, I think that's a good time to take our next break. So, guys, we're going to take another 3-minute break. You are listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life, with me, Rikki Schwartz. After the break, we're going to dive into the second and third switches that make the compassion mindset work. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. In case you're just tuning in, my return guest today is Nate Regier, 3-time author, CEO, and founding owner of Next Element Consulting. He's also a former practicing psychologist and leading expert in what we're talking about today, the compassion mindset. So, Nate, in the last segment, we talked about the first switch, namely value, that needs to be turned on for the compassion mindset to work. Let's move on to the second and third switches, which I believe are capability and responsibility. Take it from there.
Thank you, thank you. You know, the if we were going on the old traditional, most popular definition of compassion, we could have just stopped at the first switch. Um, because it's just about people are worthwhile, we help people out, everyone deserves a chance. And if that's all we did, then we would have what's called empathy fatigue.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing. In
Yeah.
fact, compassion fatigue is a misnomer. There's really no such thing. Empathy fatigue is what happens when we are always, our heart's always going out. We're always ministering. We're always serving. We're always caring. And actually, research shows that that triggers the pain centers in the brain.
Remember I said
Um,
that being empathic as I am can be a good thing or a bad
yeah,
thing? That's what
it
I'm
can
talking about.
overwhelm us. So, thankfully, what we realize is compassion is much more than just that. Compassion is also about active creative problem solving. So,
Mhm.
that comes into the second switch, which is called capability. Humans are not just valuable, humans are here to do stuff. So we're not just valuable bumps on a log, we are valuable movers and shakers. So capability means when the switch is on, it means we believe that every one of us is capable of contributing in some way and being part of the solution and moving towards something together. Everyone has a role to play. So when that switch is on, we might say things like, "Hey, what are you good at?" Or um, my daughter went on a mission trip and she was asked to do sheetrocking on some house that they were rebuilding. She didn't know anything about sheetrock. She's sitting there with a stunned look on her face. And this mentor comes over and says, "Hey, what subjects do you love in school?" And she said math. And the lady said specifically, and she says, "I love algebra and trigonometry." And then the lady said, "Wouldn't you know it? Cutting sheetrock is just all about angles."
Perfect.
And so next thing you know, that woman walked in believing my daughter was capable.
Mhm.
Or if the switch was off, she could have said, "Oh, well, if you've never done sheetrock before, let's just put you over here cleaning floors."
Yeah. I just got
And
goosebumps, by the way, when you talked about that example, because I think that's the time we don't take. So I love that
no,
example.
when the switch is on, we take time to learn about people's passions. We watch them in action and see what they love to do and what they're good at. We understand their personalities and how that sets them up for success. We learn about their strengths and we try to we're always on this curious quest for what can you do or what could you do. So when the switch is on, those are the kinds of questions we ask.
Good.
When the switch is off, we start to believe that people aren't capable. And so we may say things like, well, women shouldn't be on in leadership positions in whatever, or my dad said I'd never be able to do this,
Mhm.
or short people can't play basketball, or now I never was going to amount to this. So we just say all of these self-limiting beliefs about our capability as a human being. And whether your switch is on or off, you'll live up to it. You know,
Yeah, for sure.
I think Gandhi or maybe it was Ford said, "Whether you believe you can or believe you can't." You're right.
You're right. Ford. Ford
Um,
said it.
Ford, yeah. So that's capability. So when let's just with children, let's say maybe our child is trying something and they're struggling, and we swoop in to say, "Here, let me show you." What we're saying is, you're not capable.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working on a bicycle, I did lots of bicycle repair. My little daughter was trying to help me. She's like 4 years old. And I said, "Ooh, could you hold this piece? Could you hold it for me? I can't do it without you." And she looked at me and she walked away.
Mhm.
And she realized I was lying. I could do it without her. So I was just placating her. But
Yes.
then, so I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to find situations where I truly need her and
Yes.
she can help me. And I need to set us up so both of us are contributing." And when I started doing that, she started helping me and started wanting to be in the shop with me and started wanting to do things. So that's the kind of stuff we do with our families and in our personal lives, is really try to look for opportunities for the people around us to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I think, again, I'm always into marrying things, right? And of course, in Center for Agile Leadership, I teach several courses, and in each one, there's a module about growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
mhm,
So if I'm understanding you correctly, we as leaders or parents or even friends can contribute to the growth mindset or reject the fixed mindset of those
yep.
around us. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for people that are familiar with Carol Dweck's work, it most closely aligns to the middle switch, which is
Oh,
capability. Yeah. So the capability switch is most like the mindset of fixed versus
good. So the marriage
growth.
was correct.
Yeah, the marriage is correct. Um, yeah.
Good. I think that when I teach the class, I always give a couple of examples. First of all, I still have a number of female friends. I never hear it from males. from female friends who say, I'm not good at directions, or I'm not good at math, or I can't calculate a tip. Those are the three things I hear all the time. And it's hard really for me to understand that kind of fixed mindset before I started teaching it. Now I remind them that you are limiting making it, you're literally making it for its prophecy. You
Yeah.
won't be good at calculating a
Yeah.
tip. You won't be good at directions because you truly believe you're not good at it. So my job is always to say that's the fixed mindset. Now, what can we do about changing that to a growth mindset? Now, I never knew I was including capability switch two as part of the compassion mindset, but I am.
It's so interesting how the switch can make all the difference. So I was working with a bank, a team, executive team of a bank, and they were talking about transition issues for family-owned bank. And the father figure that would not let the son into any positions of responsibility because he didn't believe he was capable. And he would say things, they're in the room and saying, he'd say things like, well, he can't do that, or he's never done that. And the son is like, Dad, why don't you give me a chance? And whatever. And I said, I had put the switches up on the whiteboard, and I said to the dad, I said, just hypothetically, if your switch was on and you believed your son was capable, what would you do or say differently? And he
Yeah,
sat back and he's like, well, if I believed he was capable, I would probably teach him some of my accounting tricks. And the son was like, and I said, what else? And he goes, well, I would probably include him in some things so he would know what's going on. And at that moment, what he realized is that you can turn the switch on in an instant and your
yeah,
behavior could change just like that. So when people are operating from a fixed mindset, I often will say, well, just for a second, if you were capable of anything, what would you do different next? And they can think of it.
I love that.
So,
When I was in high school, I struggled a great deal with math. Not so much algebra, but when we got into trigonometry, I started to struggle because I have a little bit of prosopagnosia, which is a
mhm,
face blindness, which means it's very hard for me to remember or work with angles or 3D objects. It's just part of my limitation. But I remember my math teacher at the time when I got frustrated at the grade, God forbid it was a B minus or something. He said to me, look, not everyone's good at math, which of course I took that to mean I'm not good at math. So I went on to college, and one of my first courses was physics. I was petrified. It was a required course of my track, so I had to take it. But I remember I talked to the professor afterwards, and I said, "Look, I just want to warn you. I may be in your tutoring office quite often because I'm not good at math." And he looked at me literally like I was speaking a foreign language, and he said, "Who told you that?"
yeah,
I said, "Well, I've just never been good at math." He said, "Baloney,
yeah,
absolute baloney. From now on, you are good at math." And I got a chemical engineering degree because I really was good at math. So
yeah.
believe me, he created that capability without me even knowing he was doing it.
You were always capable, and because you believed it, you then manifested the skills.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, my last guest on my podcast, we talked about Eric Weinmeier, who's the first blind person to climb Everest.
Yeah, I know that
And I
name. I'm
mean,
surprised I don't
you
know
want to talk about capability, and the Sherpa on the way down. Here's what the Sherpa said to him: "Don't let this be the last summit. Life is not about the next summit." And it was like, "What? I just climbed Mount Everest. I'm blind, and you're saying don't let this be the last summit." It's like it's not about that. And
Yeah,
so yeah, that's what capability is about.
good, good. I love capability. Let's go on to the third one before our break, which I think is called responsibility.
Responsibility is the third switch because behavior matters. We are not just valuable bumps on a log. We are not just valuable and humans who can do great things, but we are also valuable, capable humans who live in community with other people and have to get stuff done.
Mhm.
So responsibility matters because we are in relationships and behavior matters. So the third switch of responsibility, when it's turned on, we realize that we each are responsible for very specific things: our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and that is all that we can control. And no matter what happened before, what happens next is both of our responsibilities.
Okay.
That I get to choose my feelings, my thoughts, and my next move all the time, no matter what anyone else did or no matter what happened. We just found out now, like 30 minutes ago, that everything's changing with a vacation we were going to take next week. So I can blame the airlines, I can blame whatever, or I can say, what am I responsible for now? How I feel, what I'm going to think about it, what I'm going to do next. When the switch is turned off, we start to want to isolate responsibility.
Mm.
And that looks like this:
Same. Mm.
Why do they always do this? You can never plan because the airlines are always about this flipping COVID. If you would have sent it to me on time, I wouldn't have to be late. And it goes on, or I always mess things up. It's all about trying to isolate responsibility on someone or something. And
Interesting.
that's the antithesis to sharing responsibility. Um, and this is not me being responsible for things I shouldn't. It's about being responsible for what I should and no more and no less.
Okay.
Um,
I
uh,
feel like that's the hardest one. Am I wrong? Am I interpreting
It's
incorrect?
really hard because compassion means to struggle with. This is hard but when we are talking about behavior with the other two switches on, it's a whole different thing. Because then if my two switches of value and capability are on and I wanted to confront you about a behavior, I have to treat you as a valuable human being and I have to know you're capable of changing and contributing. So that changes the conversation dramatically in how I approach it, what I say, and where we go from there.
Oh my gosh, it does.
Um,
Oh my gosh. So I don't know if we finished up the third switch. After the break, we can finish up anything we didn't touch on. Right now, I'm going to take my last 3-minute break. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. After the break, we're going to dive into any of the switches that Nate didn't already talk about, or I should say, summarize them. And more importantly, we're going to talk about what do we do with that? How do we implement it? See you guys back in 3. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. I have return guest Nate Regier here talking about the compassion mindset. So, in the last 2 segments, Nate, we talked about the 3 switches that make the compassion mindset work: value, capability, and responsibility. In the break, you said you wanted to give one more little summary of responsibility, and then we'll move on to how do those switches work together during times of conflict.
Yes. So responsibility is a big one. Everybody wants to hold people accountable and uphold the standards. So very often when something goes wrong, something happens that shouldn't, or something that shouldn't happen does, we want to go in and like figure out what happened. And in companies, they might call it a root cause analysis. And very often that whole process has good intentions, like let's figure it out so it doesn't happen again, but it becomes really about isolating responsibility and ends up undermining the other two switches.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if a very capable secretary made a spelling error and we're like, we need to send you back to remedial typing class, that's not the problem. And now we've just said you're not capable and you're not valuable. So how is this person supposed to come out of that funk and perform? So I think it's really important that we don't isolate responsibility. We all say, how can we all contribute to making things better going forward?
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good point too, because I think the minute you hear responsibility, automatically our brains go to blame. We're going to
Yeah.
isolate the blame. Good, good, good. Okay, so in the time we have left, and this is the crux of this, having the switches is incredible, practicing the switches is incredible, but conflict, crisis, and communication, we already talked about how this is hard during stress.
Mhm.
How do we put those switches together during
Yep.
conflict, crisis, and communication?
Well, the reason why people hate crisis and conflict is because we enter it with our switches off. That's the reason they hate it. And nobody wants to feel like they're not valuable or that you don't believe in them or that you're trying to point fingers. But yet that's what we do. So when the switches are on, it doesn't mean we don't do conflict and crisis. It means we enter it with the compassion mindset. And so our whole training program that we've developed over the last 8 years is all about how to do this, how to keep the switches on, and how would you act if they were on. So
Mm.
our compassion cycle talks about 3 skills: openness, resourcefulness, and persistence. And then there are strategies we teach, which are switching on strategies. They keep the energy flowing during conflict. And then we teach a particular formula called the Formula for Compassionate Conflict. And it's how to walk into a conflict without casualties with your switches on. And so that's the process. And but we actually discovered the switches last because it's actually the first thing, the most important thing.
Interesting.
And when they're on, people can learn and develop and do these things very quickly and effectively.
I think your book, Conflict, we're going to go through your books in a second, but I think Conflict Without Casualties, first of all, brilliant title. First, I'm always a big fan of alliteration, so that goes without saying. But just the it puts you into the mindset of what you're about to read about. Conflict Without Casualty is perfect. There's nobody who won't understand what that book's going to be about. I love it. I love the book. I love the title. So anything else before we talk about that book and your other 2 books?
Well, I'll tell a story about my switches being off. And I may have shared this before, I don't know, but I came home from work one time a couple years ago and I was really stressed. I didn't feel like I'd gotten much done. I was a bad day. I was at the end of my rope and I walked in the house and my kitchen was a mess. And all the way home, I'd been dreaming about, oh, if I could just be alone in the kitchen and cook dinner, it's so therapeutic. Everything will be fine. I got home, the kitchen's a mess. And I stood in the entryway, and the first thing I did was just yell so anybody could hear, why isn't the kitchen cleaned? So the first thing I did was turn my switch of responsibility off and try to blame somebody. And I heard from the other room, Dad, I don't have to have it done till bedtime, so chill out. So and that's the truth. In our household, our youngest daughter is responsible for the dishes, but once a day she has to have them done. Anytime she wants, the kitchen needs to be cleaned once a day. And she was going to wait till after dinner. And what I realized in that moment is I need to back up and turn my switches on.
Mhm.
And so I turned it back on and I said, one, I'm valuable and so is she. So she needs to be treated with respect because she's a contributing member of this household. Also, I'm capable of solving this problem. So maybe I could try to ask for what I want. And I'm responsible for my own feelings. So I went into her room and I said, Ash, I'm sorry for yelling because I had a really hard day. That's on me. My sense of frustration and lack of accomplishment has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with the dirty kitchen. That was just a trigger for me. And I was dreaming about cooking tonight. Could I negotiate with you to clean it before dinner? And she's like, sure, I'll go do it right now.
Perfect. Perfect.
Switch is
I
on.
put the picture of your switches up to the camera real close because I'm gonna have that picture in my head. Move it. Yeah, perfect. I love the fact that you use that as a constant reminder of which of your switches are on and which are off. I love visuals, so thank you for that. I this one I'm going to be able to integrate probably immediately. I loved everything you said, Nate. I loved that book. Let's talk about your other two books and let's remind everybody how they can get Conflict Without Casualties. So first of all, talk about that book for just a minute.
Yep.
Anybody who wants a copy of it, by the way, call the studio 800-930-2819. Free copies, two free copies available. So Nate, if we haven't already talked about thrust of that book.
Yep. So Conflict Without Casualties, this is a field guide. It's a little bit thicker read. It's a little bit more, it's dense, but it's really about the methodology for understanding the difference between drama and compassion and how to use all these tools in daily interactions and at home and at work. And
Beautiful.
so that's really what this is about. And it's this interestingly, sales have continued to grow every year, and we're in our sixth year now. And so I think it's catching on. I think the principles are timeless, and they're needed more than ever than they've ever been before.
I agree completely. I really, really did love the book. Then your newest book, let's talk about Seeing People Through, which does focus on the process communication model, which we did talk about in the October 2nd
Yep.
podcast. But remind everybody what that one's about.
Seeing People Through is about personality inclusion. It's all about if you care about inclusion and belonging, then personality is a must to pay attention to. And this book shows what leadership can look like through the lens of if you truly included all the personality types in each of us, what would that look like? And we're really excited because we just wrapped up a global personality inclusive workplace study. So we're going to have a lot
Ooh,
of data to share on what are companies really doing about this. Um, Personality is at the center of diversity, yet almost nobody's really doing serious stuff with it like they are with other dimensions of diversity.
understood. And I've shied away from using the word diversity lately, and I'm really transforming it to the word inclusion. I hadn't
Yep.
realized how often you have one without the other. So
Yep.
perfect timing on that. Thank you. And your last book called Beyond Drama, my favorite subtitle, Transcending Energy
Energy
Vampire.
Vampire. So that was the very first book we wrote. It was self-published. I wrote it with my co-founder Jeff King. Wonderful time. It's a little rougher, coarser book because it was the first one we ever wrote. But if you want to geek out and overdose on drama and understanding drama and what goes on, read that book.
Yeah.
The compassion part of it, the solution part of it is a little bit thin, I think, and that's why we wrote Conflict Without Casualties. But if you
Gotcha.
really want to understand what's going on psychologically, dynamically during
Gotcha.
drama, that book's really good.
Perfect. So it enhances awareness, and then your next book kind of talked about the solutions. You're aware. Now, what do you do? Yeah.
Yep. We were
Perfect.
evolving our model all along.
Of course, and you're going
Yeah.
to continue to. I'm
Yeah.
quite sure. So before we close out, thank you so much for everything, Nate. Before we close out, share your social media handles and or just the URL for Next Element, whatever you want to do, so folks can get a hold of you.
At Next Nate on Twitter,
Got it?
Next Element on Facebook, and next-element.com. Our website is really meant to be a one-stop shop. You can connect with us, you can learn about things, you can buy books. So
Perfect.
next-element.com.
Perfect. So listeners, thanks again for joining us. Every time I find out that someone listened to my ramblings and my guest information, it's honoring and humbling. So thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to two amazing producers today, Jacob Kappas as always, and Jamie. Jamie, I don't know your last name. I apologize. Can you speak in and say your last name? Reiser, Jamie Reiser. They were incredible today, as Jacob always is, in making this happen and making it seamless for myself and my guest. Finally, I'm going to close out this interview, as I do every interview, with one of my favorite quotes related to life transformation, and in particular, today's topic. This one is from none other than the Dalai Lama. And he said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Till next time, be thinking about what you can do to reclaim your life. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. Now, before you go, ask yourself this question. At my memorial service, what do I want folks to say was my passion? What do I want them to say was my purpose? If you don't know, or you don't think they'll know, then it's time to say it out loud. It's my turn. Visit myturnlifecoaching.com today and let me help you reclaim your life.